Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So, the Michigan governor's race is narrowing significantly. It hasn't been talked about a whole lot, but a lot of people were writing it off because the polls, they had Gretchen Whitmer up like a month or two ago by 18 percentage points. I knew that those polls were too lofty. I knew it would be relatively close, a lot closer than that. But even I thought, you know what, it's going to be very improbable that Dixon ekes out a victory. And that's what I said. You know, I'm from the state of Michigan. Whitmer, I don't know why she is well liked by any percentage of the electorate, if I'm going to be completely honest. But either way, she's very difficult to beat. She's an institution there. And it didn't really seem like a whole lot of people that ran on the Republican side could really mount a campaign, especially a campaign with enough resources to go out there and defeat Gretchen Whitmer and make her a one-term governor. However, Tudor Dixon in the past 2 months has narrowed that polling lead. And we know how polls typically are in Michigan. Typically, they overfavor Democrats significantly. She has lowered the polling lead from Whitmer plus 18 to Whitmer plus 5. And a couple of weeks ago, it was Whitmer plus 11. So that lead has narrowed significantly. This was always going to be a close race. But also, it's important to note that Gretchen Whitmer is below 50%. And if you're below 50% as an incumbent, that does make you vulnerable to a decent degree. So am I going to sit back here and say that Whitmer is going to lose for sure and that Dixon is the favorite? No, I'm not going to say that. But Dixon has a chance, and a chance a lot bigger than I initially thought even a couple of weeks ago. So do keep this in mind. And also, before we go product mode here, I also want to note that the RCP average shows that, you take the polling errors and past cycles into account. 22 days till the election day, polls underestimated Republicans by an average of 5.3%. If the average of the polling error holds up this cycle, Tudor Dixon would be elected governor of Michigan by the narrowest of all narrow margins. So it's important to take this into consideration. Dixon has a chance. We'll talk more about this election and how she potentially could get it done between now and then, and also look at the map. But first, I have to tell you guys about our very good friends over at My Patriot Supply, because the entire world is experiencing food shortages. Supply chain breakdowns continue to have a domino effect on everything, especially food production. Farmers can't plant as many crops now because of fertilizer shortages, forced regulations, and high fuel prices. This will cause more painful food shortages when we run out of food that we're eating now. And food takes time to grow, so when farmers don't plant, months later we don't eat, which is why you need to be prepared for an increasing number of food shortages, and the best way to do so is to invest in Ready Hour emergency food from My Patriot Supply. It's a perfect hedge against skyrocketing prices and shortages. Right now, you could save $250 off a 3-month emergency food kit supply from My Patriot Supply at preparewithredeagle.com. Get there now. These are great. These last up to 25 years in storage. That's preparewithredeagle.com. Those who know what's coming are preparing today. Shouldn't you? Preparewithredeagle.com. So the polls out of Michigan are tightening, and it's important to really look at which ones are. And you see there was a poll out of Signal MAB that came out the other day that has this as a 4-point race. That's essentially within the margin of error. And then you had Insider Advantage. Insider Advantage was the most accurate poll in Michigan in the 2020 election. There were a lot of polls that had Biden winning by 7+, and then Trafalgar was the outlier that had Trump up by a couple of points as well. The most accurate pollster was Insider Advantage. They are calling this a tie right now, 44-44, 12% undecided. And you look at the other polls in the mix, Detroit Free Press, the Epic poll, the Epic MRA poll, even though that had Whitmer up 11, that showed a massive tightening from the last poll that had Whitmer up by 16. And then you had the CBS poll that allocated all the undecideds. That has Whitmer up by 6 or so, but it did push all the undecided. So independents could potentially be swayed. Dixon and Whitmer, they debated after that poll came out. It's going to be interesting to see if the debate has any effect on future polling, although I think Dixon did pretty good. She did a pretty good job. A lot of Whitmer's ads had fear-mongered about various aspects of who Dixon is as a person and what she stands for, and I feel like she did a very good job of punching back effectively at Whitmer and basically showing how that was untrue and that Whitmer was the extremist, calling out the nursing home policies that we have seen, which definitely, you look at what happened to Andrew Cuomo based off of that. Whitmer did exactly the same thing, didn't face nearly as much blowback, and she probably should. And this election is a potential starting point for her to actually face consequences for her actions, raising gas taxes during a pandemic. You know, she promised to fix the damn roads. That was her slogan back in 2018. Did it happen? Absolutely not. And as a result, a lot of voters know this, and she's not an electoral juggernaut in the state. Although she's an institution, she's going to be difficult to beat even in a red wave year. It does not mean that there is any reality where she is going to win by more than 10 percentage points like a lot of the polls and the so-called experts have been saying, because a lot of Trump's base, which is in high number in Michigan, especially in the rural areas, even if some of these people voted for Whitmer in 2018, as some of them did, they now despise Whitmer, a lot of these, legacy Democrat types, and they're not going to be voting for her this time around. And Nate Plastic over there is going to sit up here and say that Whitmer's going to win by 9 to 10 points, even more than she won by last time, in a national environment that's probably, 10 to 15 points to the left of what 2022 is going to be. Absolutely laughable. And it shows. And Dixon's now at 8%. That's up from a couple of weeks ago in 538, where Plastic put Dixon's chances at 5%, which would be the same probability in this forecast of Greg Abbott losing to Beto O'Rourke. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen whatsoever. But beyond that point, we know how bad polls have been in Michigan. Even in 2020 in the Senate election, a lot of people said this was likely D. Some people were even saying safe D. I said that this would be a tilt Democrat race, and on paper, that's exactly what it was. You had polls showing Gary Peters up by 15, 5, 8, 7, 7, 6, 6, and 10, 9, 12 even. And you're looking at all of these polls and you see this here. The polls, even some of the Republican internal polls like Mitchell that had Peters up by 5, they were overestimating Democrats. Polls in Michigan have been awful. Look to the 2016 Democrat primary for a prime example of how they are. They consistently miss rural voters. They consistently oversample college-educated white voters living in southern Oakland County, and it shows every single time. They keep missing, and this is true. And Tudor Dixon, she's getting out there. She's using more resources. She's being funded by the DeVos family. I have mixed feelings about that, obviously, even though their social policies, for the most part, are not really bad at all. And Dixon picked Shane Hernandez as her VP, a candidate who had been endorsed by Republicans for National Renewal when he ran for Congress during 2020, although he did fall short mainly because of the fact that he didn't have that Trump endorsement that would have got him over the finish line in that primary. So that is important to note. But either way, this is going to go down the wire. And this was not supposed to go down the wire. Even in my opinion, it was not supposed to go down the wire, because not only did you have James Craig, who was supposed to be that nominee, he got disqualified. A lot of other candidates who were supposed to be formidable got disqualified early on. And as a result, a lot of Republicans wrote off this race. However, Tudor Dixon, she was already in Trump's good graces early on. Donald Trump endorsed her from there. It cleared the field in Michigan, and she won the primary. She peaked late in the primary, which is another important thing to note. And she's also apparently peaking later in the general election cycle. This is a common theme that we've seen. It's a recurring theme this cycle, but she won the primary. She did pretty well everywhere in the state of Michigan, won with 40% of the vote. And you look at it from there, and the polls, she's tightening the polls significantly, and the most accurate pollster in the state of Michigan in 2020 has this race as a tie. Not even just like a virtual tie or a statistical tie, they have this as a tie. And yes, it's true, there are a sizable amount of undecideds in this poll. We don't know where they're going, but in every single poll that's come out that we see, we see Tudor Dixon gaining and Gretchen Whitmer falling a little bit. So it's going to be important to see what happens between now and Election Day. There was only one debate. It's going to be interesting to see how much impact that will have moving forward. But still, this was not supposed to be as close of a race as it's shaping up to be. And the energy has shifted in Michigan. And even if Dixon does fall short, you're probably going to see DePerno defeat psychopath Dana Nessel in the Attorney General's race. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at the Secretary of State race there. A lot of polls have shown that Dixon is actually overperforming the Republican nominee there. In the Signal poll, even among very likely voters, enthusiastic voters, Dixon was actually leading in the Signal poll, and all the Republican candidates were leading by 1 point in that poll if you screen for not just likely voters, because there was a likely voter screen, but the enthusiastic voters. Those voters, the voters that are going to show up in droves more so than others, they showed Dixon, DePerno, and Camaro in the lead in all three of those polls. So this is going to be an interesting thing to see here, what happens between now and Election Day. We know that these polls are awful. We know the polls typically do tighten later. You could look at the 2020 Senate election or the presidential election polls for clear proof of that. I mean, James was down just a couple weeks before the election, and he was down there in like at 41%, and Peters was above 50. And this race was a race that wasn't even called on election night. It was called 3-4 days later, and the end result was a virtual tie. James was within a point or two. And in terms of what is the pathway on the map for Tudor Dixon? Is there a pathway for her to win? I think the answer is yes, there's a pathway. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I do believe this is going to be very close. I do believe it's going to go down the wire. I believe it's going to be closer than it was, a couple weeks ago or so. And Dixon has a real chance at winning, a more realistic chance than I initially expected, which is very important to note. But where's Dixon going to do better than Donald Trump? I would have to assume it would be West Michigan. She did very well in the primary in West Michigan, and also on top of that, she's funded by the DeVos family. They have a very, very historical standing in West Michigan, Kent County, Ottawa County. Your ancestral Republicans were Republicans that run statewide typically do better than Trump. It's kind of like the Wow Counties Michigan edition, although they're really not as populated altogether. But either way, I think that Dixon will probably, she could win Kent County. I think she'll run up the margins a little bit more in Ottawa County, getting the John James margins or the historically, statewide Republican margins, not named Donald Trump. And I think she'll have to do well in a lot of the rural areas. The rural areas are going to be voting for her because they despise Gretchen Whitmer. And she's starting to get a ground game going. She's starting to get her name recognition up there in terms of Dixon. And you look at the margin now that we filled that out, it's within a 2-point game. You talk about turnout dipping in places like Detroit because it's a midterm year where Republicans have the energy factor, turnout potentially dipping in a place like, Ann Arbor, in a place like Lansing as well. Can't forget about Lansing, turnout dipping a little bit there, maybe a little bit in Kalamazoo. Whitmer wins it by like 14, 15 instead of 19, looking at it there. Then the margin narrows significantly. Then you look at it and it's like, okay, well now you just have to look to the rural areas, and because it's a midterm year and Republicans have the energy factor, if the Trump base turns out for Tudor Dixon, she's probably, going to win at this point if she gets these margins in these counties. So the pathway there with the math is there. And you want to say, she'll get James margins in Oakland. She's got decent optics that could appeal to the suburbs there. You look at the margin shrinking even more significantly. Oakland County, within a decade or so, may very well overtake Wayne County population-wise. You want to talk about Macomb. Trump did the rally there in Macomb. If she can get double digits in Macomb, it's game over. I think she'll do very well in a place like Livingston County. I think she's a very good fit for Livingston. If she does better there, you look at the map right now, that's a very narrow Republican victory. And notice how I didn't even adjust any of the rural counties as well on this map. But there is a pathway for victory for Republicans in Michigan. The bottom line is she just needs to continue doing what she's doing, stay on message, have good messaging on the campaign trail, talk about Whitmer's failures during COVID, talk about infrastructure because Whitmer failed. That was her initial, big campaign promise that helped her win. Just talk about the issues that matter to Michigan voters. Don't stab the base in the back. Don't also, alienate independents in the process in the state of Michigan. If you could do that, you're going to be on pace for victory. So I think the chances of victory there for Dixon are there. They're increasing. And like the polls say, 22 days to the election, if you apply the polling error over the past few cycles historically, Dixon, according to RCP, is the favorite. Very interesting. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Red Eagle, out.